family in the swamp's abyss. It all began as a regular weekend trip. I decided to spend a few days in nature, far from the city hustle. The swamp, about which the locals had told me, seemed like the perfect place for solitude and contemplation. No one mentioned that the place was cursed. The first hours were almost idyllic. I pitched my tent, lit a fire, and enjoyed the silence, broken only by birdsong and the rustling of leaves. But in the evening, the silence became ominous. It felt as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something dreadful. The next morning, I decided to explore the surroundings and ventured deep into the swamp. The birds had stopped singing, and the wind had died down. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet became softer, and I sank waist-deep into a viscous, cold sludge. Panic gripped me as I realized I couldn't get out. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank. In desperation, I looked around and noticed strange tracks on the shore, leading into thick reeds. Struggling out of the mire, I followed them, hoping to find a way out. It was a terrible decision. Pushing through the reeds, I felt someone watching me. As night fell, I realized I had lost my way back. The sounds around me became strange and threatening. Shadows thickened, and I felt they were taking on sinister forms. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. An enormous, shapeless shadow with glowing red eyes emerged from the darkness. It moved silently, but each step echoed in my head. I ran. Branches whipped at my face, roots clung to my legs, but fear drove me forward. My heart pounded in my chest. The air became thin. Too late, I realized I had reached a dead end. In front of me was a deep bog. Looking back, I saw the monster approaching, its rotting limbs reaching for me. Its form was hideous, as if it had been born from the swamp itself. I jumped into the water, hoping to hide. Cold darkness enveloped me. My heart pounded madly, the air in my lungs ran out, but I felt the monster getting closer. The water swallowed me, and I began to drown. My eyes started to close, and I knew it was the end. But instead of darkness, I suddenly found myself in a brightly lit room. The noise of machines and people's voices filled my ears. I was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. My eyes struggled to focus on the white ceilings and the faces bent over me. A doctor, noticing my awakening, leaned over and began to explain. It turned out that all this time I had been in a coma after a terrible accident. My car had overturned on a slippery road, and I had miraculously survived. My brain had created this nightmare world to keep me unconscious. You were on the brink of life and death, the doctor said. But now you're back. Your subconscious created a terrifying world to keep you here. Now it's over. However, even upon returning to reality, I can't shake the feeling that the monster is still somewhere nearby, in the dark corners of my mind, waiting for its moment. When I close my eyes, I see it again, its red eyes glowing in the darkness, and hear its silent steps approaching me. The hospital days turned into weeks. Physical therapy sessions, endless tests, and the constant buzz of the medical machines became my new reality. But the nights were the worst. In the silence of the hospital room, I could hear the swamp calling me back, the monster's growl echoing in my ears. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt a cold draft, and the scent of the swamp filled my nostrils. I sat up, heart racing, and saw a shadow in the corner of the room. The red eyes were back, watching me with an intensity that froze my blood. I reached for the call button, but it felt as if my arm was moving through molasses. The figure stepped closer, and I realized it wasn't just my imagination. The swamp had followed me, and the monster was real. It whispered my name, a guttural sound that resonated with my deepest fears. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The room started to fade, the hospital lights dimming, until there was only darkness and those piercing red eyes. Just as the monster reached out for me, everything went black. When I woke again, the doctor was standing over me, looking concerned. "You've been having severe nightmares," he said. "We've had to sedate you several times." I wanted to believe him, but the line between reality and nightmare had blurred beyond recognition. Each night the monster returned, each time more real than before. I was trapped in an endless loop, my mind unable to distinguish the true from the false. I began to question everything. Was I still in the coma? Was this hospital just another layer of my nightmare? The monster's presence grew stronger, its whispers more insistent. I knew that if I didn't find a way to break free, it would consume me completely. One day, during a particularly intense therapy session, I had a moment of clarity. I realized that the only way to escape the monster was to confront it. That night, as the shadow appeared and the red eyes bore into me, I didn't reach for the call button. Instead, I faced the creature, heart pounding but determined. "You're not real," I said, voice trembling. "You're a creation of my mind, and I won't let you control me." The monster hesitated, its form flickering. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in its eyes. I stepped forward, feeling a surge of courage. "This ends now." With a final defiant roar, the monster lunged at me. But instead of terror, I felt a strange sense of peace. The room brightened, the shadows dissolved, and I was left standing in the hospital room, alone. The monster was gone. The swamp, the red eyes, the whispers all vanished. I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but free. The line between nightmare and reality was clear once more. In the weeks that followed, my recovery accelerated. The hospital staff remarked on my newfound determination and strength. I knew that the battle wasn't just physical but mental as well. I had faced my deepest fear and emerged victorious. But even now, sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I can still hear the faint whisper of the swamp, a reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human mind. And I know that the true horror isn't the monsters we create, but the power they hold over us until we take that power back.